So, Renee, why don't you just go ahead and start off by introducing yourself to the people in the audience and to people who may be watching this later?
Sure. My name is Renee Smith. I am the owner and founder of Pivoting with Purpose, which is a wellness advocacy organization that I founded earlier this year, but I've been doing this work for about 12 years. I'm a mother, I'm a stepmother, I'm a wife. I am currently finishing up my last week of graduate school. So I am just all things standing for Black women and making sure that they provide a safe space for them to grow and nurture who they are while they're nurturing other people.
Okay, very, very good. And I remember the conversation that we had about a month or so ago when we met, and there was you talked about Black women, and so that's where there's a lot of overlap with me as well, because I have more recently declared that I am here for Black women. That's another conversation about my tabooism, I guess, if that's a word, about saying that, but I have officially declared that that's what I'm here for. So glad to know that we are both in that same space. So can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into the therapy space and what ultimately made you want to launch Pivoting with a Purpose?
Sure. It's a long journey of self-discovery and just self-worth. About 6 or 7 years ago, I found myself working in an environment that was not healthy for me, an environment where I was dealing with, we call them microaggressions, but they don't feel micro as you're going through them. I felt like I was constantly having to prove myself in an environment, to be honest, that I never could be enough. And it started to really tear down my self-image of who I thought I was. I'm the type of person, I'm like the top of my class. All the other positions I have ever held, I had always had a leadership position. And so when I found myself struggling in a position that was basically, I felt made for me, it really made me question myself. And I started blogging. I started sharing my experiences, and then work got worse and I ended up having a panic attack. And I had never had one of those. And I really thought that I was losing my mind. I sat and I just cried and I could not get myself together. And normally I am the person everything is okay. I can push through it. And my body said, no, sis, you can't, not this time. And I started sharing my story with other women, particularly other Black women. And one of my friends who was also a social worker, she said, oh yeah, girl, I've had those. Never had told me before that she had also experienced that. I felt really alone as I was going through that process. But when I started to share my story, I realized that women, Black women in particular, we're suffering in silence. And so that's where I started really advocating for self-care, advocating for therapy, advocating for creating a safe space for yourself. It may not be your job. And, for everybody, they can't do what I was able to do, but I ended up leaving. I did not have another job lined up. I told God, I've been here long enough and I felt that you told me to leave before now. And I just picked up and I left and I didn't have another job lined up. And it was the best thing I could have done for my mental health. But that's when I realized that we need to create a safe space for us because we are literally dying. We are dying. And it's important for me to say, I stand with my sister because there are so many other groups and so many other organizations that they can say whatever group they're representing. And it's not an issue. If I say that I'm here for Black women in particular, because we're the most educated group. We are the group care of everybody. Everybody knows, everybody has a big mama story where everybody comes to the house and she's the one who feeds everybody and she's the one who takes care of everybody, and all I have in my life are examples like that of women sacrificing themselves for other people to the point of exhaustion. And that's how I was modeling myself. I didn't know anything else to do. And so Pivoting with Purpose for me was my opportunity to really say, you have a purpose. And you need to pivot away from anything that is keeping you from your main goal, which should be to live a full and happy and fulfilling life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you said a mouthful there, and I want to kind of unpack some of the things that you said. But first, we got a comment from Nancelle that said, yes, trying to fit into spaces that wasn't meant for you. So it looks like she can relate to that. I certainly can relate to that in a number of times. And even though we've talked before, I didn't know the totality of your story, but there's something else that we have in common because how I ended up in the DC area, I quit my job, I put in my 2 weeks notice and I just packed up and I moved And I didn't have anything waiting for me when I got here either. But it's kind of like what you said, when you feel something on the inside of you telling you it's time to go. I felt something telling me the time is now, you need to move, you need to go. And within about 5 weeks, I found myself here. So that's something else we have in common. So it's good to talk to people like, you and I are sharing now, because when you do talk and when you do open up and you are transparent, you find out things like that. Yes. You think you're alone, and then you realize that you're not. I just found that out about you. I had no idea, but now I know that, hey, there's somebody else. I'm not that crazy. I'm not that crazy to do that, because who you are, my beautiful sister, you did the exact same thing. And, we're kind of traveling down the same road. So we're going to talk more specifically about Black women, because obviously that's what you and I are very passionate about. But let's just talk about therapy in general and it being taboo. And I looked up the word taboo before we started, even though I kind of knew what it meant. I wanted to just kind of get a formal definition. And it said something not acceptable to say or do, a prohibition imposed by social custom, and that it also bans on the grounds of morality. So when you think about something being taboo, it's really, really painted in a dark light, something that's really bad. You're going to be shunned by society and all those type of things. So let's kind of talk about why therapy has this negative stigma. Why did it become taboo? Where did it come from, particularly in the Black community, right? Let's talk about that and how do we get here?
I think we got here because of our history of coming from enslaved individuals. I think so many times we compare our current situation to what our ancestors went through, right? Well, if my ancestors can cross the transatlantic, if they can land here and not know the language, if they can be beat and they can be raped and all these different things, and they were able to come through and they didn't have therapy, then all I need is Jesus. I don't need, to talk to anybody else about what is going on in my life. And what I think we failed to realize is, yes, we are resilient people, but that does not mean we don't need resources. Mm-hmm. Our ancestors did not have the resources that they needed to deal with all the trauma that they were enduring. And so to me, one of the things when I think about, like when I've been celebrating Juneteenth for a while now, so when I talk about freedom and I think about my ancestors, to me, being able to go to a therapist, my therapist looks like me. I have a Black woman therapist. To me, that is freedom, because I am able to get resources and pull resources that my ancestors needed, but were denied the right to get. And so for me, I think the taboo comes from, we think that our ancestors, that's all they needed was Jesus alone. And yes, that carried them, but they also carried the scars. And for me, therapy helps me to look at myself in a totality way, right? Not just me, but my mother, my grandmother, like all the people that came before me. And I'm able to actually see some behaviors that aren't healthy. They are coping, but they're not healthy coping mechanisms. They're not healthy coping skills. And so I think a lot of times we just feel like we can just pray certain things away. And while I'm a woman of faith, I also believe that God gives us people to help us. If you had a heart issue, nobody would ever just say, oh, just pray and, don't go to your cardiologist. No, they would tell you to go, and see them and see what they say and do it in tandem. I don't think you can be one or the other. I don't think if you're saying you're going to therapy that you don't have faith. And I don't, I always like to leave the avenue open for people to find their own healing. Therapy isn't for everybody. It works really well for me, but I know there's some barriers for others to get to therapy, like price. There's the issue of being afraid of, telling somebody your business, so to speak. So that makes it, because we're always told, like, what happens in this house stays in this house.
I was just about to say.
So, but when that happens, sickness stays, right? There are some things that have to be revealed in order to heal. And I think there's so many different things that, if you're a spiritual person, you'll call them generational curses. I think that trauma can follow you, especially if you're unaware, right? So many times we think that things are normal until we're able to sit with somebody and unpack some of the stuff that we went through. And we're like, that probably wasn't the best situation for you. And so that's what makes it taboo, because then it has you looking at other people that did the best they could with what they had, but that's your big mama, that's your mama. You don't want to think ill of them. And I'm not saying you should or shouldn't, just know that you're in a different space. And that's what therapy, in my opinion, can provide for you. It can provide clarity and healing, even though you might not even know you need it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I was thinking about in preparation for this live, I was thinking about like growing up, really prior to probably the last 2 or 3 years. I don't know anybody personally that has ever been to a therapist. I don't know anybody that has ever been to a therapist like in my
I didn't either.
life. None of my family,
I didn't either.
Friends, no one. Not until probably like 2 years ago, it kind of started to kind of pop up a little bit more for me. And you kind of hear people talking about that. And definitely in the midst of this pandemic, and as we're going through this, of course, now more people are starting to talk about it because mindfulness and meditation and self-care and all these things are coming up. But I think that's really sad. It's really sad. I was thinking about like my whole entire life up until about 2 years ago, I didn't know anybody. I never knew anybody in my family. And Lord knows it's all kind of stuff was in my family or whatever.
Right.
Nobody
at most. Yeah, at most. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like you said, you just, big mama prayed, your mom prayed, your aunt, whatever it is, you just pray it away. Just don't talk about it. You just get up, put a smile on your face, go to church or whatever and do whatever. And that's definitely how I was raised. You just get up and just go to school, make good grades and do whatever. And you just act like what you just saw, what you just experienced, you act like it didn't happen.
You just push through.
Suppress it, and you pack it down. And I definitely can attest to the fact that it's going to come back up because my stuff needs to come back up.
Absolutely.
So we have Nancelle in the chat, and she said she has been to therapy before. So she is someone that is, definitely, so kudos to her, definitely want to encourage, people, like you said, who it works for. Everybody it may not work for, different strokes for different folks, but for the people that it works for, we definitely, want to give them kudos. And I want to kind of, talk about what you said when you said something about your therapist is a Black woman and how you said that was, did you say that was freedom for you?
It is freedom for me. I think so many times, so many professions, especially in the helping professions, they don't look like us. Practitioners don't look like us, but we know there's certain vernacular that we have. There's a certain culture that we have that it can only be only understood by somebody within your culture. And so there are certain times I can say something and I don't have to explain it. It's just been said and she understands because of what, of her own experiences. And I've had another therapist before that was a younger white woman and she and I gelled just fine. But my insurance ended up changing over and I ended up losing her as a practitioner. And then I got an older Black woman and I did not gel with her. So to me, it is not necessarily just all about, skin color and all of that. It really is a relationship. And that's something else I really want people to understand. Just because you go in there and the therapist might look like you, your ideology and your belief system might be totally different from theirs. And it is okay for you to say, this doesn't work for me. And find somebody that it does work for. I think it is a relationship. It is an intimacy that comes along with therapy. And so for me, having somebody that I don't have to explain a lot of this backstory to was freedom for me because you get me.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I want to take it a step further because I just mentioned that I recently moved to the DC area. And one of the reasons why I moved here is because I wanted to be around more people who looked like me. And when I started thinking about my health care and all of those things, it was imperative that I got a Black woman. And for the first time in my life, my dentist is a Black woman. My gynecologist is a Black woman. My general family doctor is a Black woman. My esthetician is a Black woman. I get my nails done in a Black. It's like black women, Black women. So I think, we kind of think about that, that's a form of therapy as well. So even though they're not my therapist, that's still a form of therapy because like you said, I can walk in there and I think it's a little bit more of a trust issue for me too. Yeah. Just kind of knowing that I trust you a little bit more of what you're saying and, maybe you have a little bit more insight into me as a Black woman and even just within my body and things like that. So just wanted to kind of point that out.
Absolutely.
But I've been kind of doing a running theme this week so far, talking about Black women being superwoman. How we are super, myself included. I'm guilty. That's why I'm talking about it. So Black women thinking that we have to be super women all the time. We don't ask for help and all of those type of things. So I'm just wondering if you have any statistics on what the percentage is of Black women that go to therapy and what does that look like for other groups?
Okay. So Black women in general are more likely not to go, just kind of some of those same issues that you talked about before, but we are more in need of. In fact, I wrote some stats down. Hold on. Okay, so the Health and Human Services Office of Minority Health said that African Americans are 20% more likely to face mental health issues than the general public. And then nearly 40% of Black mothers suffer from some form of postpartum depression. And that is a huge thing for me, being a mother. I've had one C-section, and then I had a traumatic birth of my 4-year-old. And it was something where it was very dismissive. We'll just be happy that you and the baby made it through sort of situation, instead of actually like addressing the trauma that we went through, that we literally almost lost our lives, that I almost lost my child, that I wasn't awake to see my child being born. Just things that, we sometimes take for granted. And we just have Black women have the worst health outcomes when it comes to maternal mental health. We are 3 to 4 times more likely to die than our white counterparts. Something needs to be done about that, but a lot of people are just unaware. What I like to say is, unfortunately, that Black women, although we really do keep a lot of things together, we are the super women in so many different facets. I mean, we talked about not too long ago about Georgia and flipping it blue, and how that was accredited to a Black woman. But then at the same time, all the statistics for us are pretty grim. And so I think sometimes when I think of a superwoman, it is so outer, but now I really want us to put on the cape for ourselves and ask for what we need. Ask for what we need, say what we need. There are so many times that we silence ourselves, either because of it's taboo, right? I don't want to come across as the angry Black woman. Right. I want, we silence ourselves and we make ourselves small. But what I realized, playing small doesn't change my outcome, right? Like, we still have those outcomes, even if we play fair, and even if we're just as nice, and even if we, say in our P's and Q's. And so for me, when I think of a superwoman now, I think of saying something that I would say for my best friend. Because I have 2 really good best friends. They were just on here, that's Slim Shady and Mrs. G. Coleman. If somebody were doing something to them that wasn't right, that I would definitely know that I would stand up and say, hey, that's not right. You can't do them that way. But on the inverse, if it was me, I would probably be a little bit more quiet. I would just say, oh, well, it's not that bad. And I would need them, which has happened before, to kind of stand up for me. So I think when it comes to that whole stereotype of being strong, I think we are strong. And I don't feel like there's any weakness in vulnerability or asking for help or telling people what we need in all aspects, in our romantic relationships, in our friendships, in our work environments. Saying what we need does not make us weak. And I think, in a sense, it will create safer spaces for those who come behind us.
Right. And it's just like what Nancel put in the chat. You don't have to walk on eggshells when you're in Black spaces. So, what we talked about before, when you walk in the room and you can, it's people that look like you, there are safe spaces for Black women to be able to talk. And, like you said, you don't have to go through doing so much explaining, and you don't have to be the angry Black woman. I've experienced that. I've been told I'm aggressive, and I'm like, no, I'm not aggressive. I'm just not here to play. Like, it's
right.
There's a difference when I come in and I'm ready and I have all my ducks in a row and I'm ready to get to business. And when someone else does it, I'm aggressive or I'm too direct and they're not, or whatever. So there's that whole dynamic. So yeah.
You'll never fit into spaces that weren't built for you. And that's what I have to tell myself all the time. You're always gonna be too big for a space that wants to keep you small. And I always have to tell myself that, because sometimes when I feel that, like what you just said, I feel it, I feel you not wanting me to say my piece, I have to remind myself that I deserve to be in this room just as much as you, and maybe more. There are so many times we are overqualified for positions that we're in, for positions that we hold. We have the intellect, we have the experience, and we go in there timid. And there's somebody who's fresh out of school who has no experience, and they're coming in the room trying to tell us what to do, and so I just think my therapist has always told me, to go into experiences like a white man does. Like, they don't come into any room and cower. They never do. They come into the room and they commit.
They can be completely incompetent. They don't have a clue, but that, they're able to just, go in there and, be able to do that. And I've been guilty of that as well. And it's like, I know what I'm talking about. I know this job, and I'm looking around and I'm like, I'm twice as qualified. The person that I'm reporting to should be reporting to me.
Right.
But don't get me started. That's another lie, Renee. We gotta that's another lie. Don't get me started on that. But the Slim Shady said you definitely deserve to be in the room at the table. You definitely deserve. You probably need to be at the head of the table, truthfully, for the way Black women have been holding things down for centuries. So,
absolutely.
So, for someone that may, and Mrs. G. Cole said, the imposter syndrome sometimes take over, and we have to take up space that we earn. We have to take up space that we earn. Right. So, the imposter syndrome, I like that. I'm gonna write that down. I'm gonna remember that. So, for someone that may be thinking about therapy for the very first time, or maybe just kind of struggling, they're on this live, or they're gonna watch this later, or just anybody that may be thinking about it, they're still a little timid about it, Hi, Valerie, thanks for joining. They still might be a little bit timid about it. They're nervous. Like you said, I don't want to talk to a stranger. I don't want to tell my business. I don't want to go in and tell and shame my mother, my grandmother, or my family. I don't want to put my family business out there. Kind of tell us how therapy works. Kind of give us the, I know it's probably individualized for people in terms of how it's set up, but just kind of a gist of a typical therapy session. Well, first of all, if you can, tell me how do you know when a therapist is right for you? You touched on a little bit earlier, but how do you know when this is the right therapist for me? And then once you get the right person, then what do the sessions typically look like? What can you expect?
Okay, sure. So for me, I first and foremost, I go and I look at the website, right? Mm-hmm. So diversity is important to me, right? So if I see that there's a wide variety of different therapists that are there, they have a wide variety of background, they seem like they're very open to all populations, I'm like, okay, that's a place that I want to be. I look at location. Is it close to me? Is it easy for me to get to? How's traffic? All those things are important because I'm a stickler about time. So I want to be there on time. I don't want to be rushing to my appointment. I'm 15 minutes late. Like, oh, I feel awful. So, how can I get there? So all those things were important to me. And then how do you make me feel when I'm in session, right? The first session is always going to be a little awkward because you're both filling each other out. Before you actually get to your therapist, what they'll do is they tend to ask you if you have any sort of preference. Some people want to see men, some people have, so they'll usually ask you that. And then whoever is available to you, they'll kind of place you with that person as well. Because here's another drawback to therapy. Sometimes it can take a while to get in. So while people are debating about whether or not they want to go, just, I always say, get yourself on the books at least. Because it can take you a month or so to get in to the therapist to begin with. So go ahead and start that journey. If you have any inkling of wanting to even do it, start early. Start as soon as you have that unction to go. Then for me, my first couple of sessions, I've already done the intake paperwork, and they kind of ask you in the intake paperwork, what are you coming to therapy for? Mm-hmm. And as you kind of go into your first session, it's really who are you? You're getting to know your therapist is getting to know you, and they'll ask you some kind of thoughtful questions, and they'll kind of see where your boundaries are and how comfortable you feel about talking about certain things. They're not going to ask you immediately to just, what is your trauma? They're not going to just go into that. They kind of, they ease you into it and kind of see who you are. For me, what I found was not helpful for me and my therapist that I ended up firing was the fact that she tried to tell me what to do. So I had an issue with a family member, and I just was like, you know what, right now, I just don't think I need to be talking to this family member. And she said, well, you can't do that because they're so-and-so to you. That was a red flag to me. You don't know me well enough to give me advice on people in my life. This is my third session with her. And I had already had some inklings before that where her style of therapy was a little bit harsh. It was really like she was trying to mother me in therapy. And I don't need them.
Was this the older woman that you were talking about? Okay.
It was. She was trying to mother me in it. And, she was also new to the city. And so I felt like I do a lot within the city. And there was some questions that she asked me that I felt were inappropriate. I felt like she was really trying to know what my network was. Mm-hmm. Oh, so you're in this group? Oh, so you're in that group? What does that do? It was really probing into stuff that had I'm not here to talk about. If I want to talk about work, that's different. But I wasn't in there for that at that point. And so I just felt like some of her questions were inappropriate. I think for me, I trust my gut. And I tell anybody that if you're having a conversation, because they could be sweet as pie to you and you don't have any reason to say like, oh, I don't know why. I don't trust it. My friends were the ones who really told me that I don't think this is the therapist for you. You're not coming away from the therapy session with clarity. You have more questions, and not in a good way, not in a probing, like, let me thoughtfully think about my life, but more like, what the heck did I just go through sort of situation? Because I would actually decompress with them. And they were like, this is not how therapy is supposed to go. And because I was fairly new into therapy, I wasn't really sure either. But as I've gotten into a relationship with my therapist, who I've seen now for over a year, I realize now that it definitely wasn't right. You'll know, because when I got into my very first session with my new therapist, which is not new anymore, but I knew then like the difference, because when I left with thoughtful questions and I left with homework for me to do, but it was all aligned with what I had went in there for. Like there was nothing like surrounding it that wasn't a pure question, so to speak. So for me, that's how I knew that she wasn't the right therapist for me. I felt like she was asking questions that were more self-indulgent than for me. And then I left with more questions, and not in a good, thoughtful way, that not something I'm going to go home and journal about, but more like, what just happened to me sort of situation. So that's kind of like what my difference has been in therapy, and what actually has worked for me is I leave with questions that are thoughtful, that make me want to think about stuff that I've said within the session, but not make me question myself as a person.
Mm-hmm. So thinking about what you said when you first started talking, and you said she tried to tell you what to do. So would you say that the outcome of therapy is just like you said, to kind of get you to work, like a therapist isn't there to tell you what to do. Just like, right. I'm a life coach, so I'm not, which is two different things, but I don't ever tell people what to do. I always just try to ask you questions to get you to a higher level of self-awareness, right? So is that what right. What would you say should be the outcome of a therapy session? Like you said, when you get done, you're left thinking, okay, I'm asking myself more questions. I'm looking more inward. I'm digging deeper. Not that this person is here to tell you what to do, because ultimately right. you make your own decisions, right?
Right. So that is the thing too, like, self-determination, like we are allowed to even make poor choices. And that's even within therapy. Your therapist may say something to you and you like, I don't really think that's right. And you go out here and you do it and it does backfire on you. They're there to kind of help you. Okay, how can I make better choices next time? I did not listen to you last time, because I've done that before. Like they'll give you advice on something maybe within my marriage or whatever. And I'm like, I don't think I'm gonna try that. And then something happens and I'm like, oh, probably should have tried that. So then it's a point for me to self-reflect, right? Like, okay, they gave me this suggestion, because really that's what it is. And then there's evidence-based practice. So hopefully the person that you are talking to, your therapist, will give you a reason why they're saying this, what they're saying to you, and not just because, oh, this is what I think is best for you. No, they can say, well, you know what? Sometimes people with anxiety, sometimes they do really well with worst case scenarios. There's some therapists that will actually have you write out your biggest concern and go from like what could happen. So if your biggest concern is getting fired from your job, okay, then what next? Then what next? And what next? And what it does is it takes the mystery and the power out of your situation that sometimes we think about stuff and it's worse than what it actually is. Mm-hmm. And so that's what a therapist can actually do is like, okay, well, let's try this technique, because this usually works with people that, have anxiety or depression or whatnot. But again, it's also individualized. Just because it does work for 99% of the people doesn't mean it's going to work for you. And there is some trial and error in that, but it is you and your therapist working together, not your therapist telling you, like, no, you need to start that relationship. You need to end that relationship, because even in a domestic violence situation, you have to give that person the autonomy to decide whether they're ready to go, because they know when the safest time for them to go is. You can't tell them. So for me, it's really that person who respects you as a person and respects your autonomy and is not going to chastise you if you don't follow. Now, I will say this, that there may be times where the therapist will also say that you're not a good fit. Because there are some people that are just not ready for therapy, right? They'll give you suggestions. They'll try to work on stuff. And if you're not ready to work on it, they'll say, you know what, maybe I'm not the right therapist for you, or maybe you just need to take some time before you come back to therapy. And that is okay too. I don't feel like that's ever a failure either, because sometimes you're just not ready. You're not ready to unpack some of things. I mean, if you've been carrying something around for 20, 30, 40 years, that takes a lot for you to try to come in and bare your soul to somebody. So That's how I kind of see therapy.
So would it be safe to say that you nor the therapist should go into it with a predetermined outcome? Like you're going along the journey to see what's going to happen, and you're just unpacking things. Like you said, you're coming up with what's your biggest concern, and then you unpack it and kind of pull back the layers to see. But you shouldn't go in predetermined, and this person shouldn't come in with a predetermined, if I'm going to get Dina to do this, or I'm going to get Renee to do this, right? Is that safe to say?
I think so. I see it as a living, breathing document, so to speak, right? So it can change because different things will change in your life, and there's different ups and downs. Like what you think is important on Monday, by Friday, something totally different could have happened to you that'll change the trajectory of what you guys are working on. And again, it doesn't make it a pass or fail. That's another thing about therapy too. It's not a pass or fail. It's how do I feel after I'm done? Do I feel like I'm improving as a person? Am I meeting the goals that I have set for myself? Because for me, like I may go into therapy for one thing, but it trickles down to other areas of my life that is helpful to me as a person. So I may go in talking about time management, but the ultimate goal really is, well, this will also help me not fuss at my kids in the morning, right? Which helps my kids, to kind of go along. So I feel like to me, it's a full circle event, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So to everyone that is just joining, welcome. Thank you for visiting or joining with us today. I'm talking to Renee, who is from Pivoting with Purpose, and she is talking about her experience with therapy. So as we are kind of getting towards the end, if there are any questions that you have, we certainly want to hear from you. We want you to participate. If there are any questions that you may have for her or for myself, just about, therapy, what's the purpose, maybe what, some of the things that maybe she has experienced. If there's anything like that, please drop that in the chat. So Renee, what would be some just general tips or advice that you would give to somebody, just that one last push of, if you could encourage somebody, to start the steps with going towards therapy, what would you say?
I would say start. I mean, just literally go out there. There's Black Girls Therapy. There's a lot of organizations that are out there that are just, if you're looking for a therapist of color, that's out there for you. There's some that focus in on Black men. There's some that focus in on Black women. And my thing is that that's what you're looking for. Do not wait. Don't suffer in silence. If you feel that you need to talk to somebody, that you need some additional support, and it doesn't have to necessarily be something that is extremely traumatic. It could just be a transition in your life, just like we talked about moving. And, there are things that happen in our lives that kind of throw us off kilter a little bit. Just going and talking to somebody and seeing, you don't have to be in therapy forever. You may need 3 sessions. You may need 1 session and just find out that it's not necessarily for you. But I'm a big proponent. If you have benefits, look into your benefits, because there's so many times that we will have benefits and we don't utilize them, but we are at these places of business and we are giving them our all without getting something in return. So look at your benefit package, see what's available to you. Look in your community. There's a few community health centers that I know of that have a sliding scale fee. Don't let the fee of therapy stop you from going if you feel like you really need to see somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I actually work in the healthcare space. And I know for a fact there are a lot of people that have all these benefits and stuff, and they don't come in. Or unfortunately, sometimes people wait until it's too late when something is wrong. There's a problem, and then you want to, go and get some help. So Dr. Chill said, "I love therapy. It's changing my life and saving others." So that's a testament right there to what therapy can do. And so just in full transparency, I haven't actually started therapy, but I am going to. I am going to start it because as a life coach, I need a coach. I need a mentor. I need someone to pour into me so I can continue to pour into other people. So this definitely motivated me and got my gears spinning to look into it, within the next couple of days to make sure. I was going to do it earlier and then I procrastinated like I'm definitely going to do it. So,
congratulations. Good for you.
And as you alluded to, there are different types, right? There are different ones. There's general therapy. There's like relationship therapy. Mm-hmm. All different types. You can find the one that resonates with you. So I know the one I'm going to go to. I know the one I'm going to go to.
Well, good. Well, I hope it's a great experience for you because it really has been life-changing. Like I said, I am a person that has lived with high functioning anxiety and depression. And I didn't even know that's what it was. I thought this is how everybody lived. Like, you know, I just thought everybody got anxious about stuff, about due dates and deadlines and stuff like that. But there are people who don't. And there are people who get down in the dumps about certain things the way that I did. I never realized until I actually started talking about it. I'm like, oh, so I don't have to live like this. And that's another thing too, like free yourself. There's so many things that we go through day to day that we think is normal, that we think is just our everyday part. We even think it's part of our personality. It doesn't necessarily mean that it is. So that is what therapy has taught me. Like so much of my life has been spent, you know, checking off boxes and then moving on to the next thing and not just sitting and being and knowing that being is okay. I watched some of Naomi Osaka's Netflix special, and on there she talks about after she lost, she said, what is my worth without tennis? Right? She was the top tennis player. She lost just one tournament, and she said, what is my worth without tennis? And so many times our worth is put into so many different things because, oh, well, your mom was really happy when you got those good grades and you feel really great when you drive that certain car. And so all those things are temporary, though. So who are you after all of that is gone away with? That's what therapy has done for me, making me be okay with me without anything else.
And I think that's very powerful because it's like you said, sometimes we think things are a part of our personality, and that just really resonated with me, you know, to even dig a little deeper within myself to figure out like what is really me and what am I really like reacting to, or what are some of the things that I have taken on, you know, the titles that other people give you, the roles that other people give you. You know, I did that. I did that for a long time. Other people associated certain things with me. And so then when I began interacting with other people, I just already said those things back to other people, if that makes sense. I just went and said, oh, well, you know, I'm an only child. That's the reason why I act like that. I said that for years because that's what was told to me. You know, you're an only child. You act like this. And I just got that embedded in my mind instead of saying, no, that's not true about me. You know, so having to change your mindset, changing how you feel about yourself, and really just stop and thinking about how much of who you are is really just, you know, what somebody has put on you, or maybe what you're reacting to, some of those traumas or things that what's always been embedded within you. So that was good. I like when you said that about, you know, we don't really realize, or we don't realize that we're associating that with our personality, and that's really not what it is. So that was good. That was good. Okay, so before we leave, will you tell people where they can find you if they want to have more conversations with you? You know, if they want to follow you on your social media, your website.
Sure. Well, my name is Renee Smith, but all my handles, one handle is Pivoting with Renee. The other one is Pivoting with Purpose. And then my website is pivoting-with-purpose.com. So I would welcome you guys. I'm creating a community of self-care advocates and wellness individuals. And I'm working on, you know, making sure that people are taking care of themselves the way that they should and giving them space to take care of themselves the way that they should. I think there's not enough spaces out there, especially for Black women, where we can really be and let our hair down and say, I don't want to carry all of this all the time. And that is what Pivoting with Purpose is all about. I am here to help you lay down some of those burdens and, you know, pick up refreshment and self-care. I put the self back into care is what I always like to say.
Okay, very, very good. Well, thank you so much, Renee.
Thank you.
Definitely enjoyed it from the very first time that we met and talked, you know, and just finding out more about you, seeing that we're on similar paths. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. We're going to have to definitely do this again because there was a couple of different avenues I could have gone in. I said, no, Dina, stay focused, stay on the topic. So we're definitely going to have to do this again because I think there's some more conversations that we can have. But I do thank you. And I'm sure everyone that's in the audience got something from this, and people that are going to be watching it later are going to get something from this. So thank you so much, Renee, and have a good night.
You too. Have a good one. Enjoy yourself.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.